Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. The call came just after dawn, when New York still felt half asleep, and the city's sirens sounded softer, almost considerate. Mark Consuelos was standing by the kitchen window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the first streaks of light slide between buildings. Kelly Ripa was upstairs, wrapped in a robe, scrolling through notes for the morning show, practicing smiles that felt a little heavier than usual. When the phone rang, Mark didn't expect his heart to jump the way it did. He answered with a steady voice he didn't fully recognize as his own. "Mr. Consuelos," the doctor said, careful and calm, "we have your results." There are moments that arrive like thunderclaps, moments that announce themselves as life-altering before you even understand why. Mark listened as the doctor spoke, words lining up in neat clinical rows, diagnosis, next steps, treatment options, while his mind drifted to a simpler thought. How do I tell Kelly? Upstairs, Kelly felt it before she heard it. The house had gone quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt tense, like a held breath. When Mark came to the foot of the stairs, his face was composed, but she knew him too well. She had loved this man for decades, through auditions and cancellations, triumphs and tabloid storms. She knew the tiny tales, the way his jaw tightened, the way he paused before speaking, as if arranging courage. "They found something," he said. Kelly didn't sit, she didn't cry. She simply reached for his hand and waited for the rest. The days that followed blurred together in soft focus. Appointments replaced routines. Coffee dates turned into silent drives across bridges. Mark learned the new language of scans and schedules. Kelly learned how to hold fear without letting it spill everywhere. They told their children carefully, with honesty and hope balanced like a tightrope. There were questions, hugs held a little longer than usual, jokes cracked too quickly and then laughed at too loudly. Love filled every corner of the house, even as worry tried to make itself comfortable. Outside their walls, rumors began to flicker. A missed appearance, a vague explanation. The internet, as it always does, filled the gaps with speculation. Kelly saw the headlines forming before they were written. She knew how this worked. She had lived under the microscope long enough to recognize its heat. But this time, she stayed quiet. Silence for Kelly was not avoidance, it was protection. Mark faced the diagnosis with a surprising calm, the kind that comes from years of understanding that panic rarely helps. He trained his body like he always had, early mornings, steady breathing, controlled movement. But there were nights when the calm slipped, when the weight of uncertainty pressed against his chest and refused to let go. On those nights, Kelly stayed awake with him. They talked about everything and nothing, about the kids when they were little, about the first time they met, about dreams that still felt possible and fears that felt too close to name. Sometimes they sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. "Whatever happens," Kelly said one night, steady, "we do it together." Mark smiled. "You don't scare easy," he said. "I scare, I just don't run." The treatment plan began quietly, without fanfare. There were early mornings and long afternoons. There were moments when Mark felt strong and moments when he didn't. Kelly learned to read the rhythms of good days and bad ones, adjusting her energy accordingly, lifting when needed, grounding when necessary. At work, she was brilliant, funny, sharp as ever. Viewers noticed something different, though, a softness behind the jokes, a depth in the pauses. Messages poured in from fans who sensed, without knowing, that something tender was unfolding. Still, Kelly said nothing. She understood the power of her voice. She also understood the responsibility that came with it. The breaking point didn't come with a headline. It came with a look. One afternoon, after a particularly long appointment, Mark caught his reflection in a hospital window. He didn't like what he saw, but he saw change, not weakness, perspective. He turned to Kelly, who was pretending to read a pamphlet she'd already memorized. "People are worried," he said gently. "I know," she replied. "Maybe it's
Kelly
time,"
exhaled,
he said.
long and slow. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head, imagining microphones and bright lights, questions that felt too personal. She had promised herself she would speak when she could do so with honesty and hope. That night she sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. She wrote and rewrote her words, crossing out anything that felt performative, anything that sounded like armor. What remained was simple and true. Love, fear, gratitude, strength. When Kelly broke her silence, she did it her way. No dramatic music, no exclusive reveal, just a clear voice and an open heart. She spoke about the shock of hearing the diagnosis, about the resilience she saw in Mark every day, about the doctors who treated them with compassion and clarity. She acknowledged the fear, because denying it would have been dishonest, but she emphasized the hope, the plan, the progress. Health, she said, looking straight into the camera, has a way of reminding us what matters. We're taking this one step at a time, and we are incredibly grateful for science, for support, and for each other. Mark was watching from home. When she finished, he didn't clap or cheer. He simply closed his eyes and breathed. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages flooded in, stories of survival, prayers, words of encouragement from strangers who felt suddenly connected. Kelly read as many as she could, touched by the way vulnerability invites community. Mark, too, felt it. On walks through the neighborhood, people nodded kindly, respectfully. No questions, just warmth. Recovery, as they learned, was not a straight line. There were setbacks and small victories, days when energy returned in waves, and days when it hid. Through it all, they kept choosing each other, choosing patience, choosing humor, choosing hope, even when it felt fragile. One evening, months later, they sat on their porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in colors too beautiful to rush past. "Remember the morning of the call?" Kelly asked softly. Mark nodded. "I remember thinking I might lose everything." Kelly leaned her head against his shoulder. "You didn't," she said. "We didn't." If there was a lesson in their journey, it wasn't about fame or strength or even survival. It was about honesty, the kind that doesn't perform, the kind that holds space for fear and still believes in tomorrow. Mark's diagnosis changed them. It slowed them down. It sharpened their gratitude. It reminded them that love isn't just grand gestures and shared laughter. It's quiet courage at dawn, steady hands on long nights, and the choice to speak when silence no longer serves. Kelly never claimed to have all the answers. She didn't need to. What she offered instead was something far more powerful, truth wrapped in compassion. And as the city outside continued to hum and rush, inside their home, life moved forward, imperfect, precious, and deeply, stubbornly hopeful.